on pastor stress. Here's a little background to get us started. First of all, research on pastor stress reveals that pastors have stress in several areas: emotional, financial, spiritual, and social. Yet a recent study shows that in spite of these stressors, nearly 2/3 of the pastors surveyed considered pastoral ministry their ideal place to serve. At the same time, 41% of those same respondents felt that they wanted to leave pastoral ministry, at least at some point.
What types of stressors create a situation where pastors feel led to the ministry, but also feel like leaving? What have Adventist pastors done to alleviate their stress? What helps manage these stressors? And how can church members, church administrators, and pastors themselves be instruments of healing and support for those called to pastoral ministry?
And those are the questions that we'll be focusing on in this presentation. Here's how we did the study on pastor stress and ways to alleviate stress. We conducted 3 focus groups face-to-face and 2 focus groups through Zoom. We targeted different geographical areas in the United States, and we also did a focus group in Canada. Each focus group contained 4 to 8 participants with a total of 30 participants.
We had 87% of males, 30% of female, and then we had 10% of Asian, 30% of white Caucasian, 20% of African American, 20% of Hispanic Latino, and 20% of other ethnicity groups. As for the age distribution, 3% of pastors were younger than 30, 31% were between 31 and 40 years of age, 24% were 41 to 50 years of age, 28% were 51 to 60, and 10% between 61 and 70, and 3% over 71. As for the ordination status, 70% of them were ordained, 27% were licensed or commissioned, and 3% were other. As for their health, 20% claimed they had excellent health, 57% claimed that they have very good health, 17% of them claimed to have good health, 7% fair, and 0% poor.
And here are the findings regarding their emotional, spiritual, financial, and workplace stress, both based on the 2014 study and the most recent focus group study in 2020.
So in the first theme, we were looking at stressors, emotional health. And from the quantitative study, we know that 49% of pastors claim to have had depression and or anxiety. 45% reported to have media addiction, 33% pornography use, and 32% agreed to say that our family is expected never to need outside professional intervention like therapy or counseling.
And then from the focus groups, what we learned was what those different emotional stressors looked like from their perspective. Here's one from focus group 1. Perhaps the truth of the matter is there's not a ministerial marriage and family that does not need professional counseling at some point, but we know how to hide it. It's part of our professional facade. We're paid by the conference to hide it, to hide the pain. And that quote is where we got the title for this presentation. From focus group 3, I personally suffer from anxiety and depression, and that's something I struggle with. I unfortunately used escape to deal with stress. Pornography was a big part of my life for too many years. I'm grateful that I have successful support with that now, but it ate me alive. And finally, we know exactly what we believe. We know exactly what the Bible stands for and what we stand for. But emotionally, we suck. We don't know how to deal with it, and no one prepares us. Even the theological education and even psychological courses we had, we need to have that emotional education in order to gain some semblance of normalcy.
The next area was spiritual life. And so from the survey 2014, these were the percentages. When the pastors were asked about their spiritual challenges, 67% of them claimed as a challenge making time for personal devotions. 56% claimed to have difficulty with personal prayer. 54% were challenged and had troubles maintaining personal connection with God. And 40% had difficulty keeping the Sabbath day holy.
And here's what it sounds like from the perspective of the participants in our focus group study. I've been through phases where I only study to preach. I've been through those times. Another one, when it is expected from you to give and to give and to give and to teach and to be a wise man and a counselor that comes with a pastoral job description, I feel that I'm kind of exhausted and my well is empty. And I'm just not excited by helping people, by preaching, by ministering anymore. Sometimes we feel like if we have a problem, it's because we're not praying enough. And that's something I really struggle with. Like, I'm not supposed to have this because we're supposed to enjoy that peace that passes understanding. And if I don't have that, then that means there's something wrong, which means I have to pray more. And I pray more and I failed. And I just get even more discouraged. And I'm like, no, so that means I have to pray more. It's a vicious cycle. Vicious cycle.
The third area is financial stress. And in the survey from 2014, the financial concerns were as follows. 73% of pastors would say that I'm concerned about the level of retirement benefits we will have in the later years. 72% agreed with saying that it is difficult to make it through each month without worrying whether our financial resources will be adequate for our needs. 71% would say our family's inability to save money on a regular basis is a worry for me. And then 70% agreed with the statement, any unexpected financial demand plays havoc with our family's financial situation.
And I will add here that in 2014, when we did this survey, the financial concerns were the highest level of any concerns. And that was underscored in the focus group studies, and you'll hear the participants' perspective now. I haven't even really had an opportunity to think about retirement, to be honest, because I can't. If I start thinking about retirement, then it's one less thing that I can get so that my daughter can have something to eat, my wife, myself, or whatever the case is. So it's tough. It's tough. Another participant, I'm still in financial stress as a single pastor, especially moving to a high cost of living state. That's been difficult. Personally, the first 2 months that I moved here, I didn't have a home because I couldn't afford it. So I was literally doing ministry out of a hotel and then through someone's room in their house. And another one, at my stage, we have 3 young children, ages 10, 8, and 6. And I think currently one of the biggest sources of stress has been they're all in Adventist education. And we are extremely thankful for the church's subsidy, but it's a big chunk, nevertheless. And finally, and recently tax changes impacted pastors. And in one conference, your taxes increased from $3,000 to $6,000 in 1 year.
And the last area was a workplace. In the survey from 2014, these were the responses related to workplace challenge. 57% of pastors would say that church politics at the union, division, or GC level is what they consider as a workplace challenge. 56% see challenge a conflict over differing worship styles. 51% see challenge our congregation disrupts days off and vacations for reasons other than emergencies. And then 49% of pastors felt challenge church politics at the local conference level.
And here's how our focus group participants shared their experiences with these types of challenges. And the conference listens to every church member, and it gets you in trouble. And that causes more stress in ministry than anything else. If the conference would look at their pastors as their coworkers, their team, and back them up, that would relieve a lot of our stress. Another focus group member said, I think that there are certain expectations that are set by the congregation that are just too difficult and impossible to meet. From another focus group, what we have to understand is that female pastors have a different hurt, that they're hurting because the leaders don't want them, but they want the results. There's a pain that comes along with that. And finally, the problem is that you end up having to navigate what the Lord has called you to do. And I don't even know if I can call that politics, but just simply knowing how to deal with that individual that sits as your manager, as supervisor, as a person above you, right? Those are the challenges that they see in the workplace.
And now in the findings, we look at how pastors deal with emotional stress. And here are the points that we would like to present to you. Seeking social support, setting boundaries, gaining self-awareness and self-acceptance, exercising, engaging in therapy or professional counseling, and taking time off.
So we'll illustrate these points with quotes from our focus group participants. Here are a couple of quotes on social support. I think for me, it would be very challenging to be single in pastoral ministry. So just being married and then having a spouse to rant with or whatever, it has been a blessing. And in fact, what we found was that the majority of the pastors that we talked to in this setting said that their spouse was the number one person that they confided in and they sought out for social support. From another focus group, a big factor that helps me is my fellow colleagues that I can trust. I have friends in the ministry. In this conference and in other conferences, it's a small group, but they are there, to talk to. I know that I can talk to them about my frustrations, and they give me sound advice. And here's one about setting boundaries. I told my church the first day I started there that the most important thing to me is my family, and you will never get ahead of them. While I enjoy wanting to be available, if you call me late at night, you call past 10, I'm not calling you until the morning. 7 o'clock in the morning is when my phone is available. I started out with my boundaries set. I tried to set up those boundaries early. And here is a quote on gaining self-awareness. This is what they were talking about when they said that self-awareness helped with emotional stress. You can be able to deal with emotional issues if you be yourself. What do I mean by that? Don't compare yourself with other ministers, because in this work, you're not in competition. If you're good at one thing, be good at that thing. if you're not a powerful preacher, but you have the gift of ministry of presence, being there for your members, visiting them, praying for them. It's better than preaching for 45 minutes or 2 hours and sweating on the pulpit. So be yourself. And being yourself will erase the emotional stress that you put on yourself because you want to be like others. Okay. Here's a quote about counseling and how they felt that helped with emotional stress. I was pastoring in another state before I came here, and they did a fantastic job of providing counseling for pastors, which was real helpful for me because I went through a divorce there. And then the value of taking time off that alleviates emotional stress. Here's the quote from the participant. I'm trying to be intentional about taking your day off each week because I get grumpier and grumpier and more overwhelmed. Stresses come from all different places, but sometimes just even a day away or taking vacation and just to get away, as hard as it is in a cell phone world. Next.
Okay, the next area in our findings was focused on spiritual challenges. And the 3 points of how pastors deal with spiritual challenges are as follows: prioritizing devotional time, spiritual retreats, vacation and time away.
So here's how the pastors in our focus group study dealt with those spiritual challenges. In terms of prioritizing devotional times, here's one participant's perspective. For me, it's been a regular devotional time every day and inviting my family to do it also. That's how to keep accountable with devotional time. I have one devotional that I do with my family. Actually, before that, I'd like to do it by myself. And going on spiritual retreats was another way that they handled the spiritual challenges. I think that spiritual retreats we do at my conference, it's really one of the most awesome experiences. And our conference does it spring and fall. And we can go up to our summer camp and they pay for the food and it's wonderful. But it's just 3 days and most of it is silent. And then we have some times with group activities, but just getting away.
The third area, again, deals with financial stress. In our findings, we have several points in how pastors deal with financial stress. Developing financial literacy, budgeting carefully, having an employed spouse, trusting in God's provision.
Okay, let's hear from our focus group participants on their specific strategies here. For developing financial literacy, about 1.5 years ago, I joined the Dave Ramsey course, which I had to pay for, but it was great. I was able to learn a lot about taxes, finances, being able to cut a lot, but at the same time, just figure out a plan on how I could be debt-free, which is going to be in a very long time, but that's as far as I've been able to do. And about budgeting carefully and how that helped with financial stress. What has helped for us, pretty much, I think, 2 things. Living within our means, just simple personal finance discipline, and the support of family in our congregation. I'm part of a congregation that's very pastoral positive, very supportive. We are thriving as a church. And so when those special days come, they give us gifts and tokens of appreciation. And that helps out a lot. So a loving church that's willing to express their love in both words and deeds has been helpful in just trying to live within our means. Another way that the focus group participants dealt with financial stress and had some success with it was having an employed spouse. One participant mentioned, my wife definitely needs to work. Without that, we would go under. And other participants mentioned the importance of trusting in God's provision. Here's one participant's take on it. I say to my wife, I don't want to deal with it, the financial problems right now. So let's leave it for God's leading. We depend on the hope. The blessed hope keeps us going every day.
In our finding, the last area was on workplace stress, how pastors deal with workplace stress. And there were 2 points that we would like to mention: setting boundaries, and then local focus versus organizational focus.
And those were the 2 areas that our participants talked about the most. They did have many other strategies, but these are the ones that seem to resonate with most of the focus group members. First, in setting boundaries, and you heard that earlier with emotional stress as well. So setting boundaries becomes important in more than one type of stress. Sometimes I just have to say, there's so much I can do about this, and there's so much of this that I can't. I can't make all of this right. So I'm going to do what I can, and I don't do that very well, but at some point, you just have to allow yourself to say that you can't carry it all on your shoulders. And here's what they mean by local focus versus organizational focus, in the words of one of the participants. I focus on what's in front of me. The World Church can kind of do what it wants to do, but unless I'm a voted delegate, then I will let other processes take care of those things. I have plenty to do in my own sphere to keep me busy. And the World Church can go on doing what it's going to do. And I can sometimes wonder if we're on the same page. And so I think it's a greater challenge. I try to ensure that the relationships I have with my immediate superiors are clear and open, that I have cultivated those relationships. And that has been a benefit to me. So I know who I can turn to, who will be trusted.
So what are the conclusions? Adventist pastors experience many kinds of challenges, including emotional, spiritual, financial, and stress in the workplace. For a substantial minority of pastors, they think about leaving the pastorate because of these challenges. Adventist pastors are resilient and have found ways to handle their stresses, but it has been primarily by their own ingenuity. And this presentation is a call to action to more support and assistance to pastors to lessen their burdens in their pastoral roles. How will you respond in your role as pastor, church member, or church administrator?
And that's what we wanted to leave with you today. Hearing the stresses that pastors have dealt with, hearing the ways that they've found to relieve their stress, then how do you respond? What are you encouraged to do as a result of this presentation? If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the live Q&A.
So maybe Renee, Dr. Drum and Dr. Sala, if you could turn on your cameras, we can introduce you to our attendees. My name is Sharon Aka, and I'm just here to moderate, answer, help with the questions. But I would love for Dr. Drum to introduce herself, and then Dr. Kala to introduce himself, so those of you attending can get to know them better.
Hi, my name is Renee Drum, and I'm a professor of social work at the University of Southern Mississippi.
Hi, my name is Peter Sinkala. I am a assistant professor at the seminary mission department, and I'm also directing the Institute of Church Ministry.
Very cool. And these two people are friends of mine, and we've done some together, and they're just brilliant people who take on a lot of really difficult surveys and difficult research. I would like for the participants, if you have a question, you can go down to the little icon at the bottom of your screen. If you take your mouse pad and just roll it down to the bottom of the screen, you'll see a Q&A, and down there you can enter a question, and then we can have our expert presenters answer. One of the first questions we have here is they want to know if they can get the point presentation. So I think these results are very fascinating. What do you think?
As far as I'm concerned, it's fine. But it would really be up to the GC administration, I think.
Okay. So look at that. Is this information published right now, or is this still in the exploratory research stage, or has it been published anywhere?
It has not been published yet. We're just in the professional presentations and other kinds of presentation stage.
Very cool. We have another question here. Of all the factors, what would you suggest should be the focus for individual pastors? It's a multi-leveled question. So maybe there's five different questions within this question. Maybe I'll just give you the first piece of it. So of all the factors, what would you suggest should be the focus for individual pastors? In view of handling challenges.
Suggestions should be the focus for individual pastors.
So it's looking at all the factors. What would you suggest should be the focus for individual pastors in handling challenges? So it has individual pastors, conferences, ministerial series, members, and pastors' wives. It's got a whole lot of things in there. But maybe we could just talk about the pastor for a minute. What would we suggest would be the best handling challenges for a pastor?
You know, presenting qualitative research, it provides insights and different factors that happens, and then to speak generally about individual pastors, I think it would have to be really depending on the situation of various pastors. It's just hard to say and speak in general.
Expand a little bit on when you guys did qualitative research, when interviewing. One of your things was that a lot of pastors, not a substantial minority of pastors, were feeling like lead ministry. Can you expand on just a little?
Peter, I think she's talking about your study.
Well, there were two studies, and probably it is mixed in my mind right now because we were also interviewing former pastors who were ordained and then who decided to leave ministry, and of course they were already left. So we were asking them questions: what really led them to leave, and what would prevent them leaving, and so forth. And so there were some very interesting insights, and again, it's hard to provide answer just with one sentence or even two. So
Yeah, it was interesting to see that. I was actually surprised by the some of the findings, and I've done a bit of research on pastors as well, and so it was interesting to see some of the finds.
Also,
go ahead.
I would like to say that pastors in their span of ministry, they have ups and downs, and so I would say that it's not unusual to have a moment of crisis when thoughts of leaving ministry comes to your mind. But then, of course, you pray about it and you maybe speak with your spouse about it, and perhaps even with someone else. But that is not to say that when the thought comes, then I'm leaving. No, it doesn't happen. So, I mean, many pastors stayed and they got stronger. And then some other pastors stayed and they are still struggling.
Yeah. No, interesting. So I have another question here. Have you found in your research the impact of this kind of stress on a pastor's health? So in the research, were you able to connect some of these stressors to actual health impact of kind? I mean, there's many health impacts, but were you able to connect that at all? If you were, what kind of connections did you make?
What we looked at most in this study was emotional health and relational health rather than physical health, because the Adventist health study looked more at pastor health and looked at the kinds of things that the behaviors that they engaged in to stay healthy and that kind of thing. And so what we understood going into the study was that pastors, the information that the Adventist Health Study has on pastors is that their physical health was about as good as or better than typical church members.
Really?
Yeah. There was some confusion about that for a while, but that's the way it ended up. And for example, their BMIs, their body weights were a little bit under church members.
Wow.
They were following the guidance of vegetarianism and that kind of thing in their eating to a greater extent than church members. So it seems like they're the kinds of things that were happening for them was not a physical kind of health issue as much as emotional health.
Interesting. And we know that emotional health can also impact physical if emotional health stays in a stress or anxiety situation for a long time.
Exactly.
It was interesting. Some of the research, it felt a little bit like there's a rattling a little bit within this Adventist organization with all these layers and trying to find themselves and where they fit. Did you get that sense in them, or was there anything when you were talking to them that you kind of like, yeah, some people are having a hard time fitting or feeling like they fit in the organization?
Of course, that was primarily when we were talking with uh, the former pastors. There were even tears, and some of them didn't even want to have the interview because it was still painful, emotionally painful,
Wow.
even after a long time, like 20 years, and still that they excused, this particular case excused themselves from doing the interview because it was so painful. And I'm assuming what you are saying, there was this also issue of not fitting or some kind of a emotional or painful stress about it.
Or disconnect, yeah.
Yeah.
We've got a great question here. It says, what churches do to support their pastors? And I love that question because it means that people are concerned about the human that happens to be a pastor. Um, what do you have? Do you have some suggestions for the attendees?
Sharon, you were kind of cutting out on that. Can you repeat that question, please?
Sorry about that. We have a question in the chat. It says, what can churches do to support their pastors? And this is a wonderful question because it means that our attendees acknowledge their pastors are human and they want to help to be successful. So I was just curious if you had any suggestions about that.
I also like this question because pastors, there is sort of this view of pastors being the people who are supposed to be perfect and who are supposed to lead and who are the professionals. So there is not really too much personal talk and listening or asking them or even praying for them. Maybe some people pray for them, but I don't know how often it gets across to the pastors. And so they are left to seek for their support somewhere else because that's the way it is. And actually we are now in a stage of thinking of all the implications about the findings that we found in different kinds of studies. There are about like 10 or 12 studies related to pastors, and I'm looking forward to discussions that we will have, and some of the implications will be articulated in a written form. So there will be a lot more of disseminating data than just this kind of discussion. So I want to say that you will still hear about this in the near future.
I think there's going to be a book written in the North American division for next summer, really looking at a lot of different aspects of of the North American division pastors. Did you want to say any of that, Dr. Sankala?
I believe that this is really encouraging question because we want to create more discussion about what how church members typically view the pastors, and when these findings are presented, it may actually shift the attention to think, oh, that's what's happening. So how can we help? And there will be more mutuality, more collaboration. And so I believe some of the findings will be presented next year at the call convention. And so we're looking forward to that.
That's awesome. So we have another question in the chat. And this is a good one, and I'm just wondering the conversations and the research that some of this bubbled up to the surface. Some pastors involve wives in ministries, while others work independently without involving them. Which way works best? So that's a really definitive question, and I don't know that we can go with an answer to that per se. But did you get a sense of their wives being involved with ministry being a benefit or detriment, or was there any kind of sense of that, or the impact of having the wives involved in your research?
I heard both sides of it. For some pastors, their wives wanted to be involved. They saw themselves as a team in ministry. And then for other marriages, that didn't work at all. The wife had her own identity and her own career path or mother path. And so it really varied from pastor to pastor. And so with this kind of research, we can't say one worked better than another.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just that I think it's, as church members, it's our job to find ways to support your pastor and that pastor system, the pastor and spouse or the pastor and family, however they think they need to operate going forward.
I would like to just add that it did not necessarily mean that if wives or spouses were not wanting to be involved in ministry, that they were not supportive. Actually, it could have been just helpful for the pastor when he or she would come home to have a environment that would not connect or extend the work stress or work load, and they would just have a family. And so yeah, that's just an insight to see that it's not really just black and white. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. When people hear research, they immediately jump to, now what do we do? And they want answers on how can we make this better? Or how can we address the research? And oftentimes there's a step between there, really assimilating, looking at the research and trying to figure out exactly where it's leading. We have some more questions. Did you find this is a great one, and I did see it specifically in your findings. You could allude to it a little bit. Did you find one or two dominant factors for pastors who were more resilient? So you see things showing up where you saw pastors seem to be more resilient than others. Maybe a factor contributing to that. Now, one of the things you talked about is this spiritual core, them finding retreat and centering themselves spiritually seemed to help. But was there anything else?
I had a sense from the pastors that sought out professional counseling. They were very much helped by it. And not just in their personal life or family life, but in their ministry as well. So it kind of spread and gave them a sense of centeredness, a sense of belonging and direction and wholeness, wellness.
So that makes, you just made my day, because if a pastor really finding strength from seeking counseling support, willing to talk about that to the congregation, then it kind of makes counseling more, a lot of people still feel like counseling is something they shouldn't do. It's embarrassing, or that something is wrong with them. But if a pastor is going to counseling, it's building him and making him or her stronger, then it helps the congregation understand that things through can actually be helpful. So I think that's cool. It would help the pastor. It would help their family. It might help the congregation if the pastor talks about it and says, "Hey, this is helping me. This is helping grow me. This is helping keep me sane in this crazy world." One of the questions here is you may have mentioned this already. This came very early in the presentation, so perhaps this attendee came late. You may have mentioned this already. What are some of the main factors that cause pastors emotional stress? They wanted to just know a couple of those factors that cause them emotional stress.
Well, emotional stress comes from the many different things we talked about in the presentation. When you have a financial situation that is squeezing you, that goes to your emotions. You feel that emotionally. You feel afraid, you feel angry, you feel frustrated, you don't know what's going to happen. And the same thing happens with congregational stress or workplace stress. When church members have some grievance about something that's happened, and they don't talk to you about it, but instead they go to the conference office and say, if you don't discipline this guy, or you don't say something to this pastor, then we're going to take our tithe and we're going to go someplace else, or we're going to give it to some nonprofit instead of the church. And so then that causes emotional stress, emotional anxiety. And so a lot of different things can really cause pastor emotional stress.
And I guess it's probably more difficult because job is very different than a lot of people's jobs. Mm-hmm. They're there to inspire. I think a lot of pastors feel like they have to look like have it all together. And being human isn't always acceptable to the congregation members. What you're describing, Dr. Drum, human condition, the things that make a lot of people stressed out, financial issues or stresses at work and stuff. So I think it's a good thing just to talk about this, because it lets us understand that pastors are human beings, have the same, they experience life in the same way that we do. It's that they're up front all the time, and we look at them as someone societal leader, but we need to give grace. I have another in here. Someone has said, I have an excellent pastor. That's so good. But I have found that the elders are not particularly supportive or helpful. So have any suggestions on how the elders be encouraged to help pastors more? I think that's a great question. I don't know if it came right from your research, but I know that it's really occurred to you how congregational members can be supported. Elders are in a leadership positions. What could they do?
Peter, I'm hoping you have an answer.
This is like putting you guys on the spot.
The first answer I want to give is, well, hopefully they will be able to read the book about pastors to understand them better, But it's difficult because is it a matter of disconnect, relational, the elders, or is it lack of understanding of their role, or what possibly can make them not being helpful? Maybe if there was someone who would arrange for I don't want to say focus group, because that's not a research, a regular church life, but if there was an opportunity for meeting or having retreat and talk about the well-being of the church, the God's design for the church, how to function as Christ's body, probably some of the things would emerge, and clarification would happen, and
Sure.
hopefully better connection and better cooperation would be as a result.
Very, very good. So we have another chat about it's not really a question, but it's about finding ways supportive and to make sure that we treasure the wives or the husbands of pastors and care for them. And there's a challenge for us in the question as well, and it says that we need to pray for our pastors and our family, and I believe that's true. We need to pray for them. But Peter, you said something. You said that we pray for them, but sometimes they don't know that. How can we let them know that?
What was it again?
The praying. So the
Right.
challenge here from one of our attendees: pray for our pastors. How can we let them know that we're praying for them? So often you do that, but you don't ever know.
Right. Because there is this sort of a level of professionality, which means that there is a not disconnect, but there is a distance between pastor and other members. But when the members initiate, not the pastor coming and saying, oh, I am in a trouble, or I'm in a turmoil and I need prayers, that's probably less likely to happen. But if the members initiate efforts to express genuine care for the pastor, and maybe they come and ask, is there anything we can pray for, or can we just now pray for you? I know pastors who, when there was someone coming and saying, can I pray for you, at the end of the prayer there were tears in the eyes, or even pastor's wife, because we would hear them saying, this is the first time in this many years that someone asked me to if they can pray for me. So yeah.
Wow. Dr. Drum, do you have any thoughts?
I heard that in the focus groups as well, that when a church member would come and say, Pastor, I've been praying for you and your family, and it wasn't in response to anything that there was any problems or anything, it was just out of caring. out of love, out of concern. That meant so much, and it stayed with them a long time. So it's an important thing to do.
Very cool. I like that suggestion a lot. I think it would be really awesome. Do the other attendees have any questions that you would like to ask? I know that they're being very picky about time frames in these presentations, so we're going to get cut off in about 1.5 minutes. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat now in the question now. And then I think what I would love to, if Dr. Drum or Dr. Sinclair have any closing remark about their presentation, and then perhaps we can just pray as our group here is session for our pastors. But Dr. Drum, Dr. do you have any closing remarks?
I've been asked before what my motivation is to do research with pastors and their families, etc. I really believe that the local pastor is such an important part of our Adventist church. And the health of the pastor, as the health of the pastor goes, so goes the health of our local congregations. And so I believe that taking a look at pastor health and doing what we can to bolster pastor health is going to be an important step for our church all over the world.
Very nice. I think you're right. Dr. Sinclair?
Well, there is one more question now that has emerged.
Oh yeah, there's another one there. We have pastors who look at 5 to 6 churches. Could that also contribute to their stress? And they're asking now the ideal ratio. That's a hard question to answer because there's so many different factors. Any thoughts on that?
But it depends what is the role of the pastor. I think of regions where pastors have really not just 5 or 6 churches, but they have dozens of churches. But their role is completely different because these churches are basically driven by lay people. And so when you were asking about closing remark, I was thinking about how really we can more resemble the biblical model of a local church, where it is out of questions that there will be just one person who is paid to do it all, or to do the major bulk of the ministry. But ministry is actually for everybody. It's a God's way to allow people to benefit and be blessed by being involved in ministry and growing. God can transform us and work with us, help us to grow and mature as we are involved in ministry. And then the pastor's role is to really help to organize, to mobilize, to equip, and to train, and to start the mechanisms that will help the church to be healthier. But often, actually, healthy churches are healthy because the pastor or pastors are extremely busy. And I get the results of health because of the natural church development I'm involved with. So I see the scores. But the one question our pastors are too busy is actually if on unhealthy level, even with the healthy churches. And I'm thinking this is probably given by the culture we live in here in the United States, where pastors are expected to work hard and the performance orientation. And so my wish or I want to throw to the table is that we rethink this in Bible, with the Bible in our hands, and seek again what does it mean to be a church that is Christ's body.
I agree so much. That idea that the preacher is the itinerant preacher, and they place to place and plant churches, but the churches are run by the people. and they grow in ministry. It's a very it's actually practiced in several parts of the world still, but in these first world nations, not as much. So yeah, that's a great idea. We bow our heads and just all together. We can't see the participants, but maybe we can just pray together, and we can pray over our past. Peter, did you want to pray? Did you want me to pray?
Are we finished? Because there is one more comment.
Oh, is there?
Yep.
Uh-oh. Okay, let's look at this. Look at this. Right after this, they cut us off really soon, though. How can pastors foster a close relationship with each other to help each other carry each other's burdens and support each other? Oh, this is a good question. I've heard pastors don't feel free to open up to each other. They feel isolated and alone. That's a question. And we can pray.
Right. So there was this one bullet point mentioned about spiritual retreats where pastors can meet. And so that would be an excellent opportunity for them to be encouraged to be more open. But it's not really typical that pastors seek his colleague to open up for whatever reason. And it's probably also part of the culture that here we have done the research with. Rene, do you have anything to say to that?
One thing we heard in the focus group was some conferences have or sponsor monthly get-togethers for their pastors, and they'll buy them all lunch and they can just sit and talk. And that was a very helpful thing for some folks.
So in some ways, if it is facilitated by the conference, that is also helpful for the pastors.
Yeah.
And
Very good.
So let's pray together. I will start, and then I wish we could pray in small groups. We cannot, so we will just leave a silence. And we would like to encourage all of you participants to pray in your mind for the pastors. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for allowing this session where we were discussing the kind of stresses that pastors have, and how does it impact their ministry and their personal life, their family life. And it's not always easy, and sometimes the expectations are so high, and there are so many assumptions about pastors that may not really be true, and that may not be very supportive of pastors. So we are grateful for the new platform for discussing, and also for the findings, and for the articles, and even the book that will be worked on for the next year's call convention. And I hope that it will open a new understanding, a new support for pastors. And we pray for them, and we pray for everybody who is involved in ministry. May you bless them and give them peace and a vision and strength, and lead them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, thank you, Dr. Drum. Thank you, Dr. Sinkala. That's fantastic. I know that people enjoyed this. We can see that from all the questions, and we really look to the book and to more research from all of you. It would be awesome. Anyway, thank you much.
Thank you.
They're gonna cut us off in like less than a minute.
That was the time for the silent prayer.
Oh, oops.
Yep, let's do it. Everybody's praying now. Thank you.
They can silently pray us out of them.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a good thing. So attendees, what's going to happen is the session will just get turned off. So thank you for coming, and I hope you enjoy another session. And I think that we can leave because we're done and they're gonna shut it up. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Sharon. Appreciate you.